Like if you look underneath anger,
Yeah,
grief could be there.
for sure.
Look underneath depression, grief could be there.
Depression is just anger turned inwards, right? And not just that, but it's often that. And like, you know what grows really rapidly that can be like the kind of like a sibling to grief is shame. And shame grows incredibly fast in a silo. Shame cannot grow being witnessed. It can't, because then it becomes accountability. In a silo, holy Toledo, you can get a shame monster going in a very short amount of time.
Yeah.
So we talk about unprocessed grief, World Mental Health Day. It often brings up this, and this is one of the most potent things I remember hearing when I started men's work, and I know for a lot of my clients as well.
So much for being here.
So,
Gee, I think I'd like to start at the beginning and talk. Maybe you could just tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into starting Man Aligned and your counseling practice.
cool. I will do the 42-year condensed version of this. um, so, yeah, my name's Graeme Ford. Lots of people call me G or Super G or a wide variety of other things. I have been a therapist for, ooh, a little over a year at this point. I was a Waldorf teacher before that, so elementary school teacher, kind of lots of focus on Waldorf education and pedagogy as well as outdoor stuff. I helped found a school here in Canmore, Alberta, Treaty 7 territory, where I find myself now. Before that, I was a wildland firefighter. Before that, I was a social worker and I worked for the government, and I've always kind of been involved with social work type aspects. I grew up mostly in rural Alberta, before that over in British Columbia. I was, and I am, a son of a wonderful father with lots of kind of Irish European descent, and a wonderful mother who's deeply attached to her Ukrainian heritage. I have an older sister, and growing up, it was kind of like our quad of four doing lots of things together. In my family of origin, we were big on sports and movement, not super big on emotions and feeling. That wasn't something that was like rejected in my household. It was just something that wasn't practiced. Like feeling was more like, how are you feeling? Tired or hungry? And so, yeah, I spent a great deal of my teens playing sports. And then I left right after high school and went traveling in Europe and traveling for quite a few years across Canada, around. And then I caught a climbing bug and spent a great deal of time climbing. And this has all brought me to working with individuals and groups. What I know to be true in my life is that there were often times growing up where I felt like I was the only one, the only person who was experiencing whatever emotion I was experiencing. And the realization of kind of therapy really helped me to understand that there wasn't anything particularly wrong with me. It was just I didn't know where my tribe was. And that brought in spaces of like cultural awareness, being able to sort of look at different shadow aspects that exist within my family of origin and myself. And yeah, I love working with individuals. I love working with men. I love working with groups. And a big thing for me is just seeing the impacts of how the work of following the golden ratio of 2 ears and 1 mouth can really impact others. And how the individual change that we make in our own lives, like how that spreads out in the world. I'm a big believer of don't just talk about it, but be about it, whatever that is. So that's a synopsis of why I'm here. And I'm here to be of service, you know? So yeah, Manaline was born out of a personal need for a space and place to just get together with others and authentically relate. So yeah, I created that because I didn't see it happening in Canada at that time, especially during COVID. So that became a once a week space for anyone who identifies as a man to come through the doors and just authentically relate, really share what's going on for them. And yeah, it's beautiful and I'm super grateful. So that's me. That's me.
That's so cool. And around the time that this is going to be posted will be World Mental Health Day. So it got me thinking about men's mental health,
Yep.
which, you know, of course you came to mind for that because men's work is so important and having that kind of connection for men. I know before we recorded the podcast, you said too that that's a big thing that comes up for men is exhaustion and isolation.
Yep, for sure.
Are those kind of the biggest things that you see coming up in for men who come to
Um,
circle?
you know, there's for men, like there's always a myriad of things I see. So it might be excessive busyness, it might be addiction, it might be isolation, but overwhelmingly, and I'm now seeing this both with men and women, overwhelmingly what I see is men coming up who are like pots of water, right? They're like pots of water right before the water boils, when we're boiling water for rice, like those little bubbles. And they're right there. Like they're literally right there. And things are going well. Like things are functioning, but there's so little bandwidth and capacity. As long as everything continues exactly as it's going, things will be okay. But when something changes, for whatever reason, it's often too much. It's like the pot kind of overfills. And sometimes that's an outward expression. For a lot of men, what I see is they turn that inward and they make that mean something about themselves. I'm not smart, I'm dumb, I didn't do it right, I messed up, I don't deserve this relationship, whatever. So there's not a lot of capacity there. And I think an indicator of this, and this is just like a fun little checkpoint you and all the listeners can play at home. Next time you're out in a community, look a man in his eyes. Just in his eyes when you speak to him. Hey, thanks for the gas. Hey, do you know where the washroom is? Hey, do you know where this trail leads? And take note of how long that eye contact can be held and what's really behind there. In my experience, you'll get a very brief connection of eye contact and then a look away. For me, what I make that mean is don't see what's really in here. Don't see what's really in here. This is why connection is so important for men and for everyone. Let's come together. There's no right about me. There's no wrong about me. There's no right about you. There's no wrong about you. Just what's really alive in there. And that's a really simple practice. And it starts with being able to do it for oneself. Can I look at myself? Can I see my own eyes and see what's in there? Whoa, there's a lot of tired in there. Whoa, okay, cool. How do I want to meet that? I want to rest or I want to jam on more tired. What's the plan here? So that's predominantly what I'd say I'd see. And then that overwhelm or those little bubbles of water, they will come out in a myriad of ways. Hopefully healthy ways, but often not the case. Passive aggression is a big one. They will come out because it's too much to hold. It's too much to hold. And this, if we go to World Mental Health Day, I'm a deep believer that one thing that the world needs to learn, and this is across cultures for all of us, is how to grieve. So how do we grieve? How do humans grieve? Right? We used to have these demonstrative pieces, folks in our communities who would show us how to grieve. And today, for lack of a better term, those folks are removed from our communities. So how do you learn to grieve yourself, especially when you haven't seen it? If you're unable to grieve and hospice something back into where it needs to go, you're going to carry it. Whether that's the loss of a pet or a friend or a home or a job, a relationship. You need to grieve those. The amount of men who I know personally, men and women, who if I play a fun game and say, do you remember, did you ever have a beloved in high school? These are 50-year-old and older people. Can remember their name, their appearance, sometimes in some cases what music they liked, what went on the mixtape. Let's think about this. It's beautiful, and that's an honor. And that's also an inability to grieve. It's the difference between never forget did something wrong collectively. Never forget. And always remember. Always remember. Comes from a space of reverence and honor. Both are not asking for the memory to be lost. Because those memories aren't lost, they'll live in hearts. But how much bandwidth do you want to give those? Never forget it has a connotation of we need to do more because something we did wasn't enough. Always remember has a connotation, at least for me, of I need to remember the beauty that was there. Right? It's just different when we say it. And it literally comes down to vernacular and language. So like, there's quite a strong difference in between saying about a pet who's passed for you, always remember, versus never forget. Never forget for most folks often conjures up the negative times, the challenging parts, when they stopped eating, when they couldn't run, when their body just said no. Always remember often conjures up different memories. Always remember how fast that little one was, how slow they became. It's just different. It's just different. But for me, that's a core essence, and that's a grief piece. So how do you grieve, and how do you grieve well?
No kidding. How do you guide people through grief? Because I know for myself, I never really, like, even in my family too, we never talked about feelings, or I don't even know, I can count on my one hand the number of times I saw my dad cry, or we didn't, and there was no real ritual or way to express grief. So but it's hard. It's hard to open up. And I know for a lot of people, it's like there's so much in there. Like you said, the pot is so full that it's almost like you get a little bit scared to even take the lid off the pot and see what's in there. Because it's like, what am I gonna, is it all gonna come out at the same time? Where do you start?
Um, well, I think, that's an individual answer for each person. Like where do they start? I think you track in your body, track sensations, not feelings. Feelings are different than sensations. Sensations are my throat tightens up, my fists clench, I start sweating, right? Emotions are my hands are tight because I'm angry. Hold on. You don't need to make your hands being tight mean anything, even if that is the truth. So I think you start in your body, right? And you start with a very simple invitation of, do I feel calm or do I feel not calm? That's it. When I wake up, when I go to sleep, when I sit down. Another piece is when we don't know how to grieve, look for grief practices within culture, for sure. It can be really beneficial. But you go outside and you follow how grief is continuously happening in our natural world. It's continuously happening. How does the moon grieve? How does the sun grieve? How do you sing to the trees? Sing to them like you're writing a love letter. How do you sing to the earth? Or how beautiful it was to go cold plunging. This is intention and prayer. And it's being embodied in your actions. If you're really grateful, sing it. Sing it. It doesn't have to be a long song, right? But I think in a lot of ways, when we don't know how to grieve, there's a difference for individuals who are living in isolation or near isolation. Accountability can often become shame because they have no one to hold them accountable to, right?
Yeah.
What's wrong with me? I got this pot full. What the fuck's wrong with me? Like, so weird. I think one of the first steps to being able to grieve is to having a community where you
Yeah.
can your experience too. What's wrong with me? My pot's full. I feel like I'm too overwhelmed and I don't even know how to let it out. To be able to get those reflections, because then it becomes accountability. Oh, what's one thing that helps lessen what's in your pot? Oh, it's when I do some physical activity every day. Cool. Can I be your accountability buddy for physical activity? Just for the next 2 days, 3 days. What's
Mm.
one thing that increases that? That's when I choose to just be on social media all day. Okay, cool. Can I support you with that? Let's put a timer on. We're only on Instagram for 20 minutes a day. Whatever it is, whatever it is. I think grieving is a uniquely individual experience that needs to, in a lot of ways, when people are learning how to do it, start in a group. One of the things that gives me evidence for that is if you've ever been a part of a group process where someone's maybe moved some emotion or released some emotion, is often the person in the center will go, oh my God, I was holding this tear, maybe laughter, whatever. Looks different every time. Then people on the outside go, wow, that was so therapeutic for me. Hey, because you've all grieved together.
Yeah.
Your story may be different, right? But a red thread is the same. Humanity knows, and if we go to the like one of the heart songs of humanity, there's a piece in there that we all know what grief feels like. We all know what love feels like.
Mm.
You know what loss feels like. All these pieces. And it's how do you come together and just be with that? Because if you don't have anyone to come together with, how do you grieve that? It's very challenging sitting alone. Well, I guess there's something wrong with me. Why am I so sad about this? Who cares? It's better I'm not in the relationship anymore. They're better with them. Yeah, totally. Facts aren't a part of grief. Like, but holding that much energy around that is going to limit your capacity and what it is you can feel, right? So how do I grieve this and grieve it in a good way? I think one of the easiest spaces for people to start is actually if they've had a pet. And it's that practice. It's that practice. Going out, giving a little grief every day. A little grief every day.
Mm.
From the always remember space, not the never forget.
I love that.
Never forget, we need more. We need more.
Okay. But the always remember really softens it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. My brother Calais shared that with me once, and I found it really, really potent because it's a language shift. And I think, with grief, I think in a lot of ways in my life, grief was considered like you grieve when you have to, and you grieve like hard and you clean it. And what I've come to learn for myself is that death is a constant companion. It's always in my life. I'm grateful for that. And as such, grief is a constant companion as well. And there's a practice and a consistency to the ceremony of grief. Whether that's taking a pause to notice the tree that I used to walk by that's now down, right? Or to remember the path that my dog used to go. Just for a moment, just for a moment. It's not debilitating because if I bring it into a consistent practice, it's no longer debilitating, but it's just like the gym, right? We go in, we skip leg day for 9 years, and we go in and we hop on leg day. Let me tell you, it's not going
Then
to be a
we can't
positive
walk
experience.
for a week.
Exactly, exactly. When the notion of a leg day in the future is actually like the farthest thing ever. But how do you let the grief out in little pieces? And I heard a brilliant man, Dr. Michael Gay, speak to it around it being like a hose. Like a hose. If we have a full hose, right? Watering, it's got a kink in it. There's some grief. We don't just unkink it and crank it because we're going to sink the whole garden, right? But we unkink it a bit, water the garden, and then we kink it back up. We move it to the next place where some of the grief needs to be shared.
Hmm.
It is actually wildly traumatic, or in my opinion, very irresponsible to unkink that hose and just be like, let's see what happens. And
Too
there's
much.
different modalities to be used in this in a healing space. Some folks use plant medicine, some folks use different things, and those are all beautiful, and I'm in no way, shape, or form opposed to those, but like hold some reverence, right? And be very mindful of what you're doing. There's 40 years, 32 years, there's grief in there, right? And it needs to come out, but be careful not to just like rip the fire hydrant lid off and be like, I wonder what happens. Exactly, exactly. Because then we're actually causing more of a challenge than we are being of support. And I think, with healing work and men's work and just work with humans, it's not about fixing as much as it is about walking side by side. Setting a table, as some of my friends would say. We set a table, here's an invitation. Make sure the table's clean. Just an invitation. And whoever needs to come and eat will come and eat. And when they're done eating, we clean the table so that next time there isn't just scraps, those old hard pieces of cheese and forks that have mashed potatoes stuck in between. It's clean. And that's for me really about what healing can look like with others. Because you are the smartest guide in your own life, of your own life. Our job is to walk side by side. Walk beside. And everything is by choice. So I can't remember our original question here, but that's my long-winded answer to it.
No, that was beautiful. And I liked what you said about grief being a constant companion, because I feel like a lot of us just want to push grief away and just feel it once and then just leave that over there for a while.
Check.
Yeah. But actually befriending grief is so healing, and knowing that it walks with you all the time.
And I know in some ways, for myself, like some of the most powerful work I've done with grief has been through song. And I'm not a singer, like to be really clear, but
Mhm.
just having little song. Another piece to that is, creation and destruction are two sides of the same coin, right? If we think otherwise, we possibly are living in separate realities. So it's kind of like if we're so stuck in grief of what was, it's very hard for folks to make future plans because they're literally living in the garden of grief. So they don't know how to hospice it well. And what I mean by hospicing it well is going out, picking out the weeds, putting it in the compost, and coming and turning it every day and remembering, but not living in that.
Yeah.
So, and I see that often with folks. They'll go, I'm frozen, I don't know what to do. Well, have you grieved? Are you saying you wrote a letter? You burned a letter? Do you have the one special spot in the forest that you go to each day or each week or each month? And you say thank you for what was, thank you for what is, thank you for what's to come. Right? Really, like, in my opinion, not incredibly difficult practices, but really important to stay consistent with. And people step away from them because they're not wildly comfortable.
But life isn't wildly comfortable.
Nope.
So if you can bring presence and reverence and gratitude to all of it, it makes the hard times a bit easier to navigate. And just knowing that everything is impermanent too. Like there's lots of layers to grief. I mean, friendships start and they end, you know, even projects or like leaving a house. You're going to grieve your house
Yeah.
and you move on. And it's okay to do that. I think, I don't know, for myself for a long time, I didn't really feel like I had space or even really permission to really grieve even the little things.
Mhm. And it's curious to me because that's something that I'd say is fairly frequent. Like, do I have permission? Am I allowed to? Like, how do I do this? And I think the largest question to that is like, who do you need permission from? Right? There's source, there's creator. I'm deeply sad right now. Can you help me to be in this sad? Just to be here, not to fix it. Because humans have that beautiful, well, it's uncomfortable. Let's try to fix this right away. Let's make sure that we can definitely lessen the discomfort. And I would say that most of the times the lessening of the discomfort is more about like numbing it or not feeling it, and it will come back.
Yeah.
And that's, yeah, I think for me in a large part, that's what we see in the world today is uh, folks walking around needing to grieve, not knowing how. And in my experience, the reality is there is no right or wrong way. There is just the act of feeling it and being with it. I have a friend who uses a timer. He literally has a grief timer, and it's set for 3 minutes a day, and it will go off at the most random times.
Really?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like, and he'll like stand up when we're eating tacos, and he's like, "Sorry, I'll be right back." And he'll go and just like sit on the sidewalk, and you'll see him. He'll be like, sometimes he comes back with like tears in his eyes. Sometimes he doesn't. He's like, "Okay, all right, here I am," and I'm like, "That is awesome." He's like, and he's like, because for him, if he doesn't create time and space for it, it won't happen. And I'll ask, like, "Oh, was that really tired? Like, are you really sad?" He's like, some days, like, yeah, some days, no. He's like, I literally just paused and was like, here's my time to grieve.
I love that.
Much in there today. It's like, other days he's like, this timer is going too fast, but it's the consistency and it's the practice of it. Because the reality too, when we see this in like when trauma lives in our bodies, right? If we're not doing work to release that, just like Peter Levine talks about how dogs shake after seeing a intense experience and they go, and then they're like, hey, I've let go of it. Humans don't have that beautiful ability. We have that choice, but it's not innate to us. Physiologically, what happens is, and I see this consistently if I teach yoga, I was very concerned when I started teaching yoga about my inability to be flexible or do headstands. I was like, well, I don't know how I got certified to do this, but I must be the only yoga teacher who can't do headstands. This is crazy. And I started by just teaching small men's classes. And so I'd teach men's classes, and I'd think halfway through it, my Lord, this is terrible. Like, this is really bad, Gee, I don't know, all we've done is hamstrings for like 55 minutes. And then we go to Shavasana. And consistently, guys would be like, thank you. Thank you. Like, thank you. And I'd be like, guys, if you like this, like, I know the names of some studios with some teachers and they can stand on their hands. Okay. It's like this. Trust me. It's only up from here. I'd say, no, I'm not really interested in that class. I'd say, well, why? What'd you like here? What do people love about yoga? What do people consistently around the world love about yoga? It doesn't matter what kind, and I'm not talking about specific asanas. What do people love about it? There's one thing consistently that happens. All yoga classes all around. What do we get at the end? Shavasana.
Asana.
Just lay that beautiful corpse pose. Literally do nothing. Nothing. Why is that so powerful and effective? Because it's just letting people feel all the stuff that's in their body. That is how disconnected our world has become in some spaces, where the simple act of laying and feeling has become so powerful. People go, that was the best part of my class. I'll come to this once a week. I'll drive an hour to come here. Wow. You know?
Right.
And how do we build these into our own life? Because
Mm.
there's not a single person who can't do Shavasana. Ever. Yeah, most of us don't. So what's that about? What's that? So yeah, and there's grief and there's all sorts of things that can come up there. And there's nothingness as well. And all of it is welcome. But if we avoid, it takes more and more and more, more and more. So just be consistent in a practice of it. And be consistent around, can I be in connection? Can I be in community? Am I doing a practice? And am I making time and space for whatever needs to come? That's literally it, in my opinion. And when I don't know what to do, I ask, how do you grieve? I asked a friend the other day who had a brutal car crash, like 20 years ago, big, mangled up a whole part of their life. I said, how'd you grieve that car crash? Probably 25 years ago. It's like a habit. He walks every day with that. Every day. It's a long time to carry something that had a huge impact. So how can she grieve little parts of it, so that there's more spaciousness in her life to do whatever she's here to do? Okay? And a lot of people will hold that stuff right to the end. Try it. Just try it. That's the invitation. um,
A little bit at a time.
yeah. Like your heart will know whether you're grieving or not.
All it needs is the space.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes it needs to see other people do it, right?
Yeah.
I can't tell you the amount of times in the Olympics. This is one of my favorite things about the Olympics, or just sports in general. Going over and watching races that I have no business watching. I have no background in indoor gymnastics. Never done a handspring, yet can be wildly critique oriented at these professional athletes. I can't believe they took a step off the pommel horse. I wouldn't have done it like that. But then emotion will come. And this is consistent for me and a lot of folks I know. Someone will win a gold. See someone. I'm not crying. I'm so happy for them. You're tapping in to that stuff that's bubbling under. I'm so proud of them. Yeah. Heck yeah. Cry it out. Like, that was a beautiful floor routine. Cry it out. Like, I agree. But like, these are different ways to access things like that. And I know in a masculine space, sometimes I'll encourage men to watch like movies like Braveheart or Troy or something. And I'll be like, just feel into the story. Don't worry about watching it. Then I'll call them after and say, how was that? He's like, dude, I don't know if you know this, but like, I cried a bunch in that film. I'm like, good. We're letting it out. Right? And sometimes it's really exhausting to let it out ourselves. So sometimes we need kind of an invitation, a support, right? Seeing someone else let it out can be really inspiring, really helpful. So yeah, that's kind of what I got. That's what I got about that and grief. Those pieces.
That was really beautiful. And I think it actually makes sense that we're talking about this around Mental Health Day, because I can imagine that a lot of mental health problems stem from unprocessed grief. Like, if you look underneath anger,
Yeah,
grief could be there.
for sure.
Look underneath depression, grief could be there.
Yeah. Yeah, like depression is just anger turned inwards, right? It's not just that, but it's often that. Anger turned inwards. And like, you know what grows really rapidly that can be like the kind of like a sibling to grief is shame. And shame grows incredibly fast in a silo. Shame cannot witness, shame cannot grow being witnessed. It can't, because then it becomes accountability, just like what I was referencing before. In a silo, holy Toledo, you can get a shame monster going in a very short amount of time.
Yeah.
So we talk about unprocessed grief, World Mental Health Day. It often brings up this, and this is one of the most potent things I remember hearing when I started men's work, and I know for a lot of my clients as well. You're not the only one. You're not the only one who feels alone, who experiences suicidality, who whatever is going on. You're not the only one. That is such a breath of fresh air because shame goes, ah, I can't grow knowing that.
Yeah. I
Dang it.
thrive thinking I'm the only
God, I've
one.
been thinking just that my whole life.
Right.
Almost the biggest shame monster ever.
Yeah.
And when people know that, stories are different, right? Songs are heard differently. They sound differently. But when we know that we're not the only one, it allows to take off this moniker of there's something wrong with you,
Yeah.
as opposed to you experience something. Those are two different things. So it's like, you know, if that's why it's important when we have global events like World Mental Health Day, where you can say, like, oh, yeah, I felt really sad and depressed before too. I've done this too. I've experienced this as well. Then it's the realization that we're all a part of a big story, as opposed to I'm the center of the story and there's something desperately wrong with me that no one will ever fully understand.
Yeah.
You may have experienced something that nobody else experienced, but the feeling, the sensation with it is something that people have experienced, and it will come from a different story. There's a great deal of power in that. Great deal of power in that. So, like, unrepressed grief, I'm bad, I'm wrong. My life happened to me in these ways. Poor me, see, here's the evidence showing how wrong I am. Here's the shame. There's no one else here to give me a reflection that maybe I'm not bad. See, I told you I am bad. Well, there's just something deeply wrong with me that no one will ever understand. And it's like, well, that may not be true. And if it is true, you already know how that feels. So let's find out if it is true. Find out if it is true, right? So yeah. Unprocessed grief, the wrongs of the world. At Burning Man, which is coming up, they have this beautiful temple. And I've never been to Burning Man personally, but a friend of mine is a very avid Burning Man attendee. And he tells me about one side of the temple is just pieces of wood. It's a beautiful structure. And there's pens and felts there. And on one side of it, a couple of years ago, it just had essentially affirmations for self. So write an affirmation for yourself, whatever it is. I'm tall. I like the way my sweater hangs on my body. Whatever it is, doesn't matter. Okay? You can go as deep or as light as you want. And he said going and reading the affirmation wall was one of the most impactful things he'd ever done. Because it's just hearing people speak to themselves like they would their own inner children.
Mm-hmm.
I love them. No one sings lullabies that aren't based in love. They're based in love. They might not sing them with love. They're based in love. So how do we take our words and change them in a way where we're loving ourselves? It's like, I had a friend once describe to me when I do group work and I call in the directions wherever I am, starting in the west and we go around. He said, why do you call in the directions? I said, well, out of honor. out of respect and out of love and out of care. And he said, oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. I said, why don't you sing to him? And I said, whew, I don't know. I said, I thought of singing to him. He said, you told me you called them in out of love and care. I said, yeah. He said, well, why don't you sing to them like you're trying to sing a love song to someone who you love and care about? And that image and that feeling made such a difference for me. When I speak to myself, can I speak it through a love song? When I speak to others, can I sing it through a love song? When I speak to the trees, can I sing it through a love song? Because we spend so much of our time speaking fact. If I want you to speak from your heart, I damn well have to be able to speak from mine. And I need to set the table of here's my heart. Whether that's a question of, hey, how are you doing? Or something else. If I want you to come from your heart, I need to come from mine. And if I don't, that's okay too. At the gas station, maybe I don't want to know exactly how you're doing. Vanessa, I'm going to get coffee. Do you want a gas station coffee? Yes, no, maybe, right? Like, so it's once again returns to the setting of the table. You said that. What's your invitation?
That. I can just see it. I can see the heart table like in front of me. And you just, as you're going through your life, just be like, hey, here, I set this table. Would you like to come sit? No? Okay. You want to sit? Okay, sit for a little bit. Let's be here. What a beautiful way to live, intentional way to live.
Yeah.
And then go sit in the mirror with your heart table out.
Yeah. And set, like, for me, it's something that can be done with grief too. We're coming up into the fall, right?
Yeah.
Like picking up some leaves and arranging them in a little pattern. It's just setting a table for grief. I might sit there for a while, or I might just keep walking. But it's taking the time to set that table. And someone else coming along, might be four-legged, might be two-legged, might find that table and go, this is where I need to grieve. The loss of my squirrel friend who didn't come home yesterday. Whatever it is, whatever it is. But if we're not taking the time to do that, the water is going to continue to boil. And eventually it boils over, in my experience. And it boils over, it will come out in whatever kind of pathways we've learned and heard about from before. In my experience, those often are the pathways that I want to live. We're going to make sure my water is. It's poured out a little bit. It's poured out a little bit. So more can come. More can come. And that's, yeah. I think, I know that's a way for me. Yeah. Setting tables.
Big tables.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's a really beautiful practice. And if you're watching this right now, I would definitely invite you to try that out. I like the idea of the leaves, especially, yeah, we're coming into fall. Those will be easy to find. Leaves, rocks, put them in a little circle, set the table, put your grief there.
And if it's a space you're going to return to, make it a practice. Bring it, put some milk in a jar and honey in a jar. And go feed that grief once a day. Feed it with the beautiful things that our ancestors used to feed with, so that it can be hospiced well. And we can always remember, but we don't have to be held and never forget. And I think, yeah, that's a part of it. It's a part of it, being witnessed in our grief. So yeah, that's what I got. That's what I got, Fred.
Perfect. That feels complete. Thank you so much for that. Every time I talk to you, it's like our conversations are nourishment for my soul, and I know that they will be for the souls in our audience as well. So I'm so grateful to know you and to be able to have these conversations with you, and for all of us who get to witness this and be a part of this and learn how to be more more open and more intentional. That's that's what it's all about. That's what this podcast is all about, and that's what life is all about.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for taking the time
of
with me
course.
today.
Of course. Yeah. It was an honor. It's super fun to have these conversations. And, I'll say what a brother of mine, Pierre Etienne, often says. He's a very wise guy. He says this: anything that you or anyone else finds helpful that I've said has come from mentors, people I deeply care about. Anything that hasn't been helpful has come directly from my ego. So take what nourishes you and leave the rest. And be consistent in your practice and be gentle on yourself. And know that we're all just here in support and that no one can do it alone. No one can do it. Even those monks who go to the mountains, they still come out. They still come out, you know? So yeah, connection is the medicine. And anyone who's looking for men's work stuff, knows a man, loves a man, is a man, identifies as a man, please check out manaligned.ca. We have lots of online and in-person offerings there. And if you're jiving with this, check out Graeme Ford Counseling as well. And because that's another way I show up in service. So yeah. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And look forward to hearing from you and anyone who's listening.
Very cool. And I'll put all of Graham's links in the description box below this episode so you can easily connect with him. I'll put all of his socials as well. And yeah, thank you so much for your time, your energy today. Really appreciate you.
It was an honor. It was an honor.